them all what I'm made up. Strut down the hall, won't stop till I get enough.
Okay, so let's dive into this. 4 Beatles biopics.
Wow. One for each Beatle.
All directed by Sam Mendes, all landing around 2028. I mean, that's huge news, right?
It absolutely is a massive event for film, for music.
It just immediately brings up this huge question, doesn't it? How on earth do you convincingly play a Beatle on screen?
Well, exactly, because they're not just, historical figures you read about in books. They're sort of woven into the fabric of, well, everything. People feel they know them, their voices, their faces.
The mannerisms, yeah.
Yeah.
It's personal for so many people.
It really is. It's about capturing something, well, almost intangible beyond just the facts.
Totally. And that's really the heart of our deep dive today.
Yeah.
You sent over that great BBC News piece that gets into the real nitty-gritty of portraying them, especially focusing on those accents, the Liverpool sound.
You're right.
You were interested in, what makes a portrayal of someone really famous click beyond just, looking like them.
Yeah, what are the nuances?
So that's our mission today. Let's try and unpack the challenges these actors. We've got Harris Dickinson as John, Paul Mescal as Paul, Joseph Quinn as George, and Barry Keoghan playing Ringo, what they're actually up against.
What are the things that could make these performances work? Or, well, not work.
Yeah, what's going to make or break it?
Well, the first thing, and it's a big one, is just the sheer weight of expectation. It's immense.
Well, definitely.
The article quotes a Beatles historian, Paul Dunoyer,
Right.
and he says something pretty striking, that many people know the Beatles as well as they know their own families.
Wow. Okay, when you put it like that.
It means these actors aren't just playing roles. They're stepping into shoes that are, deeply embedded in global culture. How do you even start with that?
It feels like walking a tightrope, doesn't it?
Yep.
Dunoyer talks about needing to suspend disbelief.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the crux. We all have these mental images, these sound clips, basically. Any tiny thing that feels off, it just jars immediately.
It does. You remember the film Backbeat?
Yeah, about the early days. Stuart Sutcliffe.
Exactly. Stephen Dorff played Sutcliffe. Looked quite a bit like him, actually.
He did, yeah.
But his Liverpool accent, well, it got pretty mixed reviews, didn't it? Some people bought it, some really didn't.
And that just shows how much focus there is on that specific detail, the voice.
It's critical. I mean, think about other music biopics. The singing voice is always a massive focus, right? Do they sound like the artist?
Always.
With the Beatles, you've got that pressure for the singing, obviously, but then there's this whole other layer. Their speaking voices, those specific Liverpool accents, instantly recognizable.
So it's like a double whammy, vocally.
Absolutely.
And it seems like it's not just a case of doing any Liverpool accent. Dunoyer brings up an interesting point there, too.
Oh, yeah.
He kind of suggests that maybe John Lennon with the whole wig and granny glasses image might seem easier to capture visually.
Okay.
But that Paul McCartney could actually be the trickier one to nail.
Why is that?
Apparently, McCartney himself has been pretty critical of past attempts. He really dislikes being portrayed as just, the cute Beatle or sometimes sort of manipulative.
Ah, okay. So getting that feedback directly from the source, that adds another layer of pressure, doesn't it?
Immense pressure. You're not just trying to convince us, the audience.
You might be judged by the actual person, or at least the surviving members.
Exactly. You need to find that balance, capture something authentic without tipping into, a caricature.
Avoiding caricature is key.
And this is where it gets even more detailed, linguistically speaking. The article brings in Etta Sharp, who's a dialect coach from Merseyside.
Right.
And she points out something vital. The Beatles' Liverpool accent back in the 1960s. It's not quite the same as a really strong Scouse we might hear today.
Oh, interesting. It's evolved.
Yeah. She even mentions John Lennon on the Let It Be album, doing that little snippet of Maggie May.
I remember that bit.
She says he slightly exaggerated the accent there, almost making it sound a bit more like the contemporary sound of that time.
So the actors can't just mimic a modern Liverpool accent. They have to sort of time travel with their voices.
Pretty much. They need a historical recreation of the accent. What kind of differences are we actually talking about?
Well, that ties into what Dr. Paul Cooper, a linguistics lecturer also mentioned in the piece, says.
Okay.
There's research showing the Liverpool accent has actually become more distinct, more pronounced over the decades. The phrase they use is, Scouse is getting more Scouse.
Huh? Really? So it's intensified?
Apparently so. Which means if an actor just does a full-on modern Scouse, it'll probably sound, well, wrong for the 60s Beatles, a bit anachronistic.
Right. They need to subtly pull back on some of those features that are stronger now.
Exactly. Dial it back. Find that specific 60s nuance.
Wow. Okay, that's a serious level of detail. And then you've got the actor's own origins playing a part. Sharp mentions that Paul Mescal and Barry Keoghan, the fact that they're Irish, it might actually give them a slight edge. Because apparently there are some shared characteristics, some phonetic overlaps between certain Irish accents and the Liverpool sound. Especially in those early Beatles recordings, you can maybe hear hints of it.
Right. You do sometimes hear people mention similarities maybe in the melody or some vowel sounds.
Yeah.
That down and then up quality Sharp talks about in some Northern Irish speech.
Yeah.
You can sort of hear echoes of that rhythm in early Beatles interviews sometimes. And it's a big but.
Uh-oh.
She also warns that similarities can be a trap. It makes it easy to just do a sort of generic Northern sound or lean too heavily on the Irish side.
Instead of properly nailing the specific Liverpool features of that era.
Exactly. Those subtle differences, the precise sounds, that's what makes it convincing or not. It's easy to miss the target.
It sounds incredibly difficult. The article also talks to Michael Hawkins, an actor who's actually played both John and George.
Oh, wow. Okay. He'd have some insight.
Definitely.
Huh.
He really stresses the need for just deep research. Watching things like A Hard Day's Night, the Get Back documentary.
Immersing yourself completely.
Yeah, absorbing not just the words, but the rhythm, the pauses, the body language. And his big warning is, don't fall into caricature, find the authenticity.
That makes sense.
But what's really telling is, even though Hawkins is from Liverpool,
Right.
when he played George Harrison, he still got called out in one review for his accent not sounding quite right.
No way. Even a Scouser playing a Scouser got critiqued on the accent.
Apparently so. It just shows the level of scrutiny, if even someone from there can face that.
That's intense. It underlines how hard it is to capture that specific sound perfectly for everyone, especially diehard fans. They'll be listening so closely.
Forensic listening, almost.
Yeah.
So, thinking about all this then, the huge expectations, the incredibly tricky accent that's even changed over time, the danger of caricature, maybe even getting notes from Paul or Ringo. What about Mendes casting actors who aren't from Liverpool?
Yeah.
Dunoyer seems quite pragmatic about it. He basically suggests that, look, this is for a global audience. And while the accent matters, maybe nailing it perfectly is slightly lower down the priority list than, say, capturing the overall spirit or the acting chops.
That sounds like a realistic take for such a massive project. Mendes has to juggle so many things: acting talent, the chemistry between the four leads, their ability to embody these massive icons.
Right.
Perfect accent replication might understandably be secondary to finding actors who can deliver on those other fronts for a worldwide audience. But yeah, as Dunoyer kind of hints, that approach could still disappoint some people, especially people from Liverpool or the really dedicated fans who see that accent as, fundamental.
It's a real balancing act, isn't it? Art versus absolute authenticity versus what the audience expects.
A very delicate one.
Okay, so if we pull all these threads together, it's just crystal clear that bringing the Beatles back to the screen convincingly it's an extraordinarily complex job.
It really is.
It's so much more than just finding guys who look a bit like them. Getting the voices right, and specifically that nuanced 1960s Liverpool sound, that seems like a monumental task on its own.
A huge hurdle, yeah.
These actors, they've got to deal with the sheer weight of how much we all think we know them, the fact the accent isn't static, the risk of just doing an impression, and maybe even scrutiny from the actual Beatles.
I think the main takeaway is just how uniquely challenging it is to portray figures who are so deeply embedded in our collective cultural DNA.
Yeah.
It demands more than just great acting. It needs this really nuanced grasp of history, language, and the almost mythic status these four guys hold.
Absolutely. Which kind of leaves us with a final thought, something for everyone listening to maybe chew on. Given how intensely familiar we are with the Beatles, the look, the sound, every story beat, what other historical figures do you think pose similar or maybe even bigger challenges for actors, and why?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Like, beyond just the obvious physical stuff or the accent, what are those other maybe less tangible details that really make a historical portrayal feel utterly convincing and real to you? Definitely something to ponder.
Sound the alarm. I'm coming up. We'll have the ball. I'm sweet like a buttercup. You're Bobby doll.